boardroom felt colder than I remembered. Late morning light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Operations Suite 3 at Aerovista Airlines headquarters in Cascade Ridge, painting long, sharp shadows across the stone-tiled floor. The conference table, sleek white marble with polished chrome legs, seemed almost too pristine for the gravity of what was about to unfold. I sat at the far end, gripping the edge of my navy new blazer, mind racing. In the chair opposite me, Victor Langston, the new director of flight operations, stared at his laptop screen as though the spreadsheet before him were more important than the man sitting across the polished surface. Without looking up, his voice cut through the silence, calm and detached. "Captain Montague, I'm afraid your position has been eliminated as part of our recent restructuring." He hovered over the table, fingertips drumming an impatient staccato on the glass. "Your compensation package no longer aligns with our projected growth model." I forced myself not to flinch. "My name is Benjamin Montague," I replied, voice measured though my heart thundered in my chest. "I'm 56 years old, and I've dedicated the last 18 years of my life to Aerovista. From my first months as a co-pilot, all the way through my tenure as senior captain out of Cascade Ridge." I inhaled deeply, tasting the sterile air. "I've never had so much as a single safety incident. Never once missed an on-time departure." The words came out steadier than I felt, but each syllable held a lifetime of memories. The shudder of the fuselage on takeoff, the hush of the cabin during the pre-fleet briefing, the patient nods of my students in the simulator. He finally looked up, pale eyes flicking over me as though I were a line item on a balance sheet. "The severance details are in that folder." He slid a manila envelope across the table. I accepted it without opening it, my gaze drifting to the window behind him, where a gleaming Aerovista Boeing 737 taxied toward the runway. The morning sun glinted off its wings like a beacon, a reminder that life above the clouds went on, even as mine was about to come crashing down. "Flight AV-20-2432 Denver is scheduled for departure in 20 minutes, he continued, his tone almost offhand. "Your successor, Captain Jacob Peters, will have the helm today. You signed off on his captain certification 3 years ago." I nodded once, swallowing a sudden lump in my throat. "Is there anything else?" My voice felt oddly distant, like I was describing the scene rather than living it. Victor Langston shook his head, already turning back to his spreadsheet. "Human resources will handle your exit procedures. They'll meet you downstairs." Rising from the chair felt like shedding a second skin. I straightened my navy blazer, a habit ingrained from my Air Force days, before stepping toward the door. 18 years of loyalty and precision had dissolved in less time than it takes to taxi to the runway. As I reached for the door handle, he called after me, "Captain Montague?" I paused, glancing over my shoulder. "You'll need your uniform returned before you leave the building." His voice held that final note of detachment, business protocols overriding a career's worth of dedication. I nodded, body taut. "Understood." Then I stepped into the hallway, where Marissa Gray from Human Resources waited, clipboard in hand, expression neutral to the point of imperceptibility. We walked toward the elevator in silence, each step echoing off the terrazzo walls. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. A text from Ethan Cole, one of my first officers. Is this really happening? I hid the phone before she could see. No point in making this more public than it already was. Marissa guided me into the processing room, where I would surrender my badge, swipe card, and the crisp uniform I had worn with pride since 2006. In the locker room, I changed into the civilian clothes I'd brought, jeans, a plain gray sweater, and folded my uniform with the military precision I'd learned during 11 years of Air Force service. As I laid the Navy jacket atop the pile, my fingers brushed a small photograph taped inside my locker door. Me and my very first flight crew, beaming in front of our aircraft. The ink had faded at the edges, but I remembered that day vividly. The hope, the camaraderie, the belief that we were building something indestructible. Most of them were captains now, commanding their own flights. None of them knew that the man who had taught them to fly was about to be grounded for good. I hit the elevator button. As the doors slid shut, I replayed the path that had led me here, scraping together every penny for flight lessons by working the late shift at a regional refueling station, soloing at 19 and never looking back, hauling cargo across the Midwest in my early 20s, answering the call of duty in the Air Force at 26th, and flying combat missions overseas. When I joined Aerovista at 38, Its hungry executives were desperate for seasoned pilots. Graham Sinclair, the airline's founder, had personally courted me, recognized that military mild discipline could shape the safest, most reliable crews in the industry. Build me the best damn flight crew in the business, he'd said. And for 18 years, I had done exactly that, immersing young aviators in simulated emergencies, late-night briefings, debriefs that ran until the sun peeked over the horizon. Every captain who earned that fourth stripe in the past decade had trained under me. Under that banner of excellence, Aerovista had become the preferred carrier for executives, families, and government officials alike. But when Graham retired 3 years ago, his son Jeffrey took the reins. And along with him came a battalion of consultants armed with spreadsheets and efficiency algorithms. Small cuts here, tighter schedules there, seemingly innocuous tweaks that, compounding over time, eroded the very safety culture I had fought so hard to instill. 6 months ago, Jeffrey hired Victor Langston to streamline operations. Langston didn't know a throttle from a tie rod end, but he had an MBA and marching orders to reduce payroll. Senior captains vanished, replaced by contract pilots at half the cost. Simulator hours were slashed by 30%. Training budgets dwindled. Every safety margin I had painstakingly built was being eroded in the name of profit. I raised my concerns at last month's management meeting. Langston gave me a thin smile. "We're just aligning with industry benchmarks," he'd said. I'd left the room wondering when industry benchmarks had become more important than human lives. My phone buzzed again as I stepped off the elevator on the 3rd floor. Catherine Reynolds, our chief flight instructor, wanted to see me in the pilot's lounge. I should have gone home, taken the envelope, and walked away. But an insistent tug pulled me toward the familiar gray doors of the lounge. Inside, 8 uniforms clustered around a mahogany coffee table. Ethan Cole, Catherine Reynolds, Daniel Cooper, and 5 others whose faces I recognized from hundreds of safety briefings. Their expressions were a blend of shock, anger, and betrayal. "Is it true?" Ethan asked again, voice low. I gave a curt nod, effective immediately. Silence fell like a thunderclap. Catherine snorted, folding her arms. "Nothing personal, huh? You've been here longer than half the exec team has been alive. What's next for you?" Daniel Cooper, who had been my first officer for 5 years, leaned forward. "What are you going to do?" I shrugged, words hollow even to my own ears. "Take some time off. Figure out my options." "This isn't right," Ethan muttered, pacing between the windows that overlooked the North Tarmac. "You're the backbone of our training." I looked at each of them in turn, feeling the weight of their stares. "I appreciate the support, but you all have flights to catch." Catherine's jaw tightened. "My next flight isn't for another 24 hours. I'm thinking of calling in sick." "Don't jeopardize your license," I warned softly. "That's not what I'd want." I turned to leave, but my phone rang before I could reach the door. The caller ID read, Graham Sinclair. My breath caught. "Ben, I just heard," he said, voice crackling with anger and disappointment. "Jeffrey told me you were retiring. You ready for it?" I hesitated, watching the pilots in the lounge through the glass. "Not exactly," I admitted. "This is not how I plan to leave." "No," he grumbled. "It's not. But you still have contacts in this business. Marcus Chen over at Skylane Charter has been looking to overhaul their entire training program." Skylane Charter, a boutique airline specializing in luxury corporate travel. They had the resources to rebuild safety protocols from the ground up. "I might be interested," I said, hope kindling in my chest. "But I just walked out that door. I need a break." "Fair enough," Graham replied. "Take the weekend. I'll set up a meeting Monday morning." We hung up. I slipped my phone back into my pocket and turned to see Victor Langston striding toward the lounge, face flushed with irritation. Beyond the glass, more pilots had joined the original 8, now nearly 20 strong. A furious pride rose in me. 18 years of perfect attendance, middle-of-the-night replacements, holiday flights, emergency diversions. Every sacrifice had served Aerovista's reputation. And, in return, they'd given me 15 minutes and a manila envelope. I raised my chin and stepped back inside just as Langston reached the door from the other side. "Don't you all have flights to prepare for?" he barked. 20 pairs of eyes turned toward me. I squared my shoulders. "Actually," I said quietly, "we need to address our crew's safety concerns before takeoff." Langston's face hardened. Captain Montague is no longer employed by Aerovista Airlines. Any safety issues should be reported through proper channels. Through you? Catherine's voice was calm but laced with steel. The same person who cut our simulator sessions by 30% last month? His tie gave a slight knock as he straightened. Those decisions were based on efficiency analytics and industry standards. Daniel stepped forward. Those standards put lives at risk. And now you are firing the one person who quietly compensated with extra training hours. I held up a hand. This isn't about me. It's about protocol and proper training. The pilots have legitimate concerns and they deserve to be heard before we launch a plane full of passengers into the sky. Langston glanced at his watch. Flight AV 3000, 176 to Chicago, boards in 30 minutes. Flight AV 2000, 240 to Phoenix in an hour. You're contractually obligated to fly your routes. Unless there's a legitimate safety issue, I interrupted, meeting his gaze. Federal regulations are clear on that. A tense silence followed. Then Langston pulled out his phone. I'm calling Jeffrey. He stepped aside to dial, and in that moment the pilots formed a semicircle around me. Uniforms crisp, expressions resolute. The stubborn spark of solidarity I'd ignited in them flickered like a beacon. I felt, for the first time since that spreadsheet meeting, a surge of purpose. 18 years of devotion had built something stronger than a corporate chart. It had forged a family, and they were not going to let it fly blind. A low hum of tension filled the briefing room as I watched my former trainees huddle in small knots, heads bent over laptop screens and scattered paperwork. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered in time with my pulse, each flash a reminder that what began as a simple stand-down had blossomed into something far more potent, a groundswell of collective resistance. Catherine Reynolds looked up from her keyboard, eyes meeting mine with a fierce intensity. "What's our next move, Benjamin?" she asked, in a quiet voice that nonetheless carried across the room. I ran a hand through my silver-streaked hair, feeling the weight of 18 years of loyalty and discipline settle on my shoulders. "No grand strategy," I confessed, voice low. "I'm simply making sure your voices are heard." But even as I spoke, I sensed momentum surging through the crowd. Pilots flooding in by the dozens, alerted by an invisible network of texts and whispers. This was bigger than any one man. The door swung open and Victor Langston re-entered, a self-satisfied smirk playing on his lips. He swept a glance across the gathering. "Jeffrey Winters is on his way," he announced. "In the meantime, all pilots are ordered to prepare for your scheduled departures immediately." A ripple of laughter broke out, sharp, incredulous. James Bennett, a grizzled captain who had flown alongside me since we both joined Aerovista 18 years ago, folded his arms. "Or what?" he challenged, voice roughened by decades in the cockpit. "You'll dock our pay? Threaten us with disciplinary action?" His tone carried the defiance of a man who has stared down storms at 35,000 feet. Langston's jaw tightened. "If you refuse, you risk termination. Try explaining to the board why you're firing senior captains in the middle of high season." James shot back, eyes glittering. The room crackled with defiance. Before Langston could retort, the elevator dinged, and Jeffrey Winters strode in. Tall, impeccably tailored, and utterly unprepared for the scene. "What's going on here?" he demanded, scanning the room with thinly veiled irritation. My voice rang out steady. "Your crew has safety concerns, sir. Concerns that have been systematically ignored for months." He fixed me with a stony glare. "Benjamin Montague, you're no longer employed by Aerovista Airlines." A murmur rippled through the pilots. I met his cold stare. "This isn't just about me. It's about every passenger who trusts your name." Jeffrey turned to the group. "I understand your attachment to Captain Montague, but this is a business decision." His tone was clipped, practiced. "No," Catherine interjected, stepping forward, chin held high. "This is a formal safety stand-down, initiated by the flight crew and protected under federal aviation regulation and our union agreement." Jeffrey's cheeks flushed, surprise, anger, perhaps fear. "Fine," he spat. "You have 1 hour to submit your concerns in writing to Mr. Langston. After that, all of you are to report for your flights." He paused by my side, lowering his voice. "You're making a mistake. I could have made your transition painless." I shook my head. This isn't about me. He smirked. We both know it is. He turned on his heel and stalked from the room, flanked by Langston and two stern-faced security officers. As the door clicked shut behind them, the room exhaled in relief, and then refocused. The pilots gathered around Catherine's open laptop, fingers flying over the keyboard as they assembled a comprehensive dossier of safety violations. I retreated to the back of the room, allowing them the space they needed. Every now and then I leaned forward to offer a fact, a recollection, but mostly I watched with a swell of pride. They were methodical, professional, relentless, the embodiment of every lesson I had imparted. After a few minutes, I slipped out to make a call. My phone rattled to life in my palm. Mr. Chen, this is Benjamin Montague, I said into the receiver, stepping into the hallway. The crisp corridor lights felt antiseptic against my skin. Captain Montague, replied the voice of Victor Chen, CEO of Skyward Global, calm and authoritative. Harold Winters suggested I reach out. I allowed a brief smile in my voice. Harold spoke very highly of your operation. He did, Chen admitted. And he's right. What's happening over there now? I gave a concise overview of stand-down, pushback, threats of termination, safety violations. By the end, Chen's voice carried a trace of excitement. Fascinating, and entirely predictable. We'll talk more tomorrow. Can you move our meeting from Monday to first thing? I want you aboard sooner rather than later. I can adjust, I replied. Good, he said. In the meantime, don't sign anything from AeroVista. No severance papers, no non-competes. Understood. Excellent. I'll text you details. I returned to the briefing room to find Catherine tapping at a spreadsheet. Maintenance logs, incident reports, regulatory citations. Daniel Cooper beckoned. Benjamin, look at this. She turned the screen. Side-by-side PDF showed identical maintenance entries. One version flagged a component replacement as critical, the other marked it routine advisory. Inspection intervals had been pushed months past manufacturer recommendations. I felt bile rise. How long has this been going on? I asked softly. Since the new maintenance software went live, Catherine replied. About 4 months, right when Langston claimed it would optimize workflow. I scanned the documents. This is beyond cost-cutting. It's outright fraud. Catherine nodded grimly. These records get filed with the FAA. At that moment, Jeffrey Winters swept back into the room, flanked by Langston and two corporate security agents. Your hour is up, he intoned. Langston will review your written concerns. Everyone else, report to your flights or face abandonment charges. Security will escort any holdouts from the premises. He gestured to me. I stood, meeting his gaze. Did you know about the falsified maintenance records? His mask of calm faltered for a heartbeat, just long enough for me to glimpse panic in his eyes. I'm not aware, he lied. Langston leapt in. That's absurd, we have no proof. Catherine raised her chin. We do, she said, producing both versions of the reports. Here they are. Lies dissolved in the face of evidence. Jeffrey squared his shoulders. Meeting adjourned, he declared. But as the security officers advanced, I caught Thomas Cole slip Catherine's laptop into his flight bag. Even if they expelled us from the building, the truth was safe. Outside, the cool spring air hit me as I was led to the employee parking lot. I climbed into my car, phone buzzing with a text from Victor Chen. Meeting confirmed, 9 a.m. tomorrow at Skyward Global HQ. Dialed Harold Winters as soon as the guards drove off. Harold, it's worse than we thought. They're cooking the maintenance books. I heard his breath hitch. That explains the sudden profit surge. Good work, gathering the evidence. The pilots have it. Catherine has it. But Winters threatens to ground them if they refuse to fly. Stay clear of the terminal, he advised. I'll make the calls. I drove home to my empty house, divorced, daughter off at college on the East Coast, feeling the enormity of what lay ahead. Within an hour, my phone exploded with updates. Flight AV 3176 to Chicago canceled, mechanical issues. Catherine, AV 224 to Phoenix grounded, crew unavailable. James, all Denver routes scrubbed for the day. Individual acts of conscience, not a coordinated strike. Avoiding union penalties, yet halting every major route. By evening, the AeroVista website showed dozens of cancellations. Then my phone rang. Captain Montague, this is Inspector Lisa Brennan with the FAA. I have information on maintenance record falsification, I said. Good, she replied. We'll connect you with Investigator Reynolds. I agreed to give a statement. The next morning, I arrived 15 minutes early at Skyward Global's gleaming headquarters in Lakeshore City. The lobby's high ceilings and polished marble floors reflected the company's blue-silver insignia like a promise. Victor Chen met me with a firm handshake. Thank you for coming, he said. Let's talk. In the glass-walled conference room, he cut straight to business. Aerovista's in serious jeopardy. The FAA raided their offices last night. Their stock has already taken a hit. I nodded. I suspected they were cutting corners. Chen offered a thin smile. We've been tracking them. Their missteps create an opportunity for us. He slid a thick folder across the table. Inside lay an employment contract. Director of Flight Operations and Training, complete autonomy, a compensation package that surpassed anything I'd earned at Aerovista. Build it your way, he said. Safety first, always. I leafed through the contract, feeling a spark of optimism ignite. I'll need to review this in detail. Of course, he replied. But know this, we want you on the runway by next week. I looked up, resolve hardening. After 18 years of service and betrayal, I was finally in control of my own flight path. Victor Chen's conference room at Skyward Global was awash in afternoon light, the polished mahogany table reflecting the excitement in his eyes as he slid a stack of offer letters toward me. Outside, the hustle of Lakeshore City's financial district pulsed through the floor-to-ceiling windows. We're prepared to offer positions to any qualified Aerovista pilots who want to make the switch. Immediately, he announced, voice steady but brimming with anticipation. I paused, letting the weight of that promise settle. For 18 years, I'd poured every ounce of dedication into Aerovista until Victor Langston and Jeffrey Winters had discarded me. Now, here in Skyward's sleek high-rise, I held the power to reshape dozens of careers in a single stroke. I glanced at the pilots gathered around, Catherine Reynolds examining her notes, Thomas Cole exchanging determined looks with Daniel Cooper, and a handful of new faces eager for change. They were the professionals I'd mentored, steady hands in turbulence, calm voices in stormy skies. How many positions are we talking about? I asked, voice measured, even as my pulse quickened. How many pilots do you trust to build something better? Victor leaned forward, fingertips steepled. At least 30, he said, eyes meeting mine. Experienced, safety-focused captains and first officers. Exactly the caliber we need to execute our premium route expansion. A thrill ran through me. 30 men and women whose wings I'd polished, whose skills I'd honed in countless simulator drills and emergency procedure walkthroughs. I thought of their faces in the lounge, eyes alight with defiance, and nodded. Perfect, I replied. That's exactly the team we need. My phone buzzed. A text from Catherine. FAA investigators at Aerovista HQ. All flights grounded pending inspection. I showed Victor the message. He smiled wryly. Timing is everything in business, he observed. Sometimes you have to wait for the right moment to make your move. I looked back at the growing group of pilots, civilian-clad but still radiating the quiet authority of aviators. Like when your competitor fires their most connected pilot and alienates their entire flight crew in one catastrophic day of miscalculations, I said. The room rippled with knowing smiles. Victor rose and extended his hand. Welcome aboard, Benjamin Montague. Let's rebuild better than ever. I shook his hand firmly, sealing our partnership. This was not vengeance, it was reinvention. 3 weeks later, I stood in the heart of Skyward Global's newly expanded training and simulation center. The cavernous facility hummed with activity. 6 full-motion simulators lined one wall, their cockpits gleaming under soft overhead lighting. Emergency response modules designed to replicate onboard fires, rapid decompression tests, and engine failure scenarios stood ready. Adjacent classrooms featured panoramic screens for interactive weather manner lectures, and the latest augmented reality headsets for immersive navigation exercises. Victor joined me, arms crossed as he surveyed the space with a proud smile. This is extraordinary, he said, voice echoing slightly in the high-ceilinged hall. You've outdone even my most ambitious specifications. I ran my hand along the simulator's smooth fuselage hull. You promised full autonomy, I reminded him, and you delivered. He checked his watch. The team should be arriving any minute. On cue, the main doors swung open. Catherine Reynolds led the procession, Tall, composed, dressed in smart business attire but carrying the same flight bag she'd used as Aerovista's chief instructor. Behind her came Thomas Cole, Daniel Cooper, James Bennett, and 27 other pilots I had trained. Their civilian-style jackets did nothing to hide the sharp confidence in their posture. "Welcome to Skyward," I said simply. Catherine's grin was immediate. "This is exactly what we needed, Captain," she replied, eyes gleaming as she took in the state-of-the-art simulators and debriefing pods. As the pilots fanned out, exploring the facility, testing controls, inspecting instrumentation, mapping out classroom seating, Victor pulled me aside. 30 pilots in one day, he marveled. "That's quite a statement to the industry." I looked at the assembled team, my modern legion of safety advocates. "They're the best," I said, "and they deserve an employer who values them." My phone rang. On the display, Harold Sinclair. I stepped away to answer. "Benjamin," he began without preamble, "are you watching the financial channels?" "Not yet," I admitted. "Why?" "Turn on any business network." He paused. "I've got a link." I nodded to Victor, who tapped the screen at the front of the briefing room. A major business news channel flickered to life, the ticker below the anchor flashing. Aerovista Airlines, AVX. Stock plummets 46% since FAA investigation announcement. Jeffrey Winter's resignation was the top headline. Board forced him out after preliminary FAA findings, Harold narrated. Langston's gone too, effective immediately. The graphics shifted. Aerovista cancels 340 flights in 3 weeks, stamped across the screen, followed by a report on leasing interim aircraft and crews at premium rates. Victor turned to the pilots, voice triumphant. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the future of premium aviation." I remembered Victor Langston's dismissive words. "Your compensation package no longer aligns with our growth model." In that moment, he was right, though not in the way he intended. I, and the 30 skilled aviators who had chosen to follow me, were collectively worth far more than Aerovista ever recognized. Our value was quantifiable. 30 seasoned pilots, an intact safety-first culture, and the ability to ground an entire competitor overnight. 6 months later, I found myself standing on the tarmac at Skyward Global's newest crew observation deck, high above Gate 12. Below us, a sleek Boeing 77 Dreamliner glided in for its final approach. Its Titan gray fuselage cut through the amber dusk sky, reverse thrusters glowing as they slowed its descent. It was Catherine at the controls, executing a textbook landing that would have made any senior instructor beam with pride. As the aircraft taxied to a stop, I felt a familiar thrill, the same surge of satisfaction I'd always known before touchdown. Skyward had added 16 new premium routes, capturing a significant share of the market Aerovista once dominated. Our training program, my program, was now lauded industry-wide as the gold standard for safety and operational excellence. Harold Sinclair joined me on the observation deck, leaning on the stainless steel railing as he watched ground crews guide the Dreamliner toward the gate. "They called me yesterday," he said casually. "The Aerovista board offered me the CEO position." I glanced at him, eyebrows raised. "And?" He shook his head, a rueful smile on his lips. "That chapter is closed." Below, the cabin doors hissed open, and Catherine led her crew down the jet bridge. Their confident strides and easy banter spoke volumes. They trusted the airline that trusted them. "They're sending an envoy," Harold continued. "The new board chairman wants to talk to you, Reed." He cocked an eyebrow. I let a chuckle escape. "Desperately," I murmured, watching Catherine spot us and wave. I turned back to Harold. "What will you tell them?" He studied my profile against the sunset-lit tarmac. "That you're where you belong," he said softly. I nodded. "Exactly." Tomorrow, I would be back in a captain's seat, this time piloting a charter flight from Lakeshore City to Tokyo. Not because Skyward needed me to fly the route, but because I had insisted on retaining cockpit time as part of my executive duties. Some skills, like the feel of the yoke in your hands and the sight of distant runways, never fade, regardless of title. Harold gestured to the silent Dreamliner. "You built something remarkable here." I placed a hand on his arm. "We'd built it," I corrected him, thinking of every pilot who had risked comfort and security to stand up for what was right. The late-day sun glinted off the oncoming lights of the runway. recalling that long ago morning when I had watched Flight AV2-2233 taxi from Victor Langston's office window, unaware that it would be the last aircraft I'd captained for Aerovista. Now, in that golden glow, I was exactly where I was meant to be. Not grounded, just flying a better route.